our last program that maybe the participants or the researchers or the legal drafters, they will prepare one paper, and then we try to make it, to change it in policy paper, policy brief, executive summary, like that. So I hope that we can do that next time. But once more, thank you for your joining us in this opportunity. Thank you, and now I give the chance, or give the lead of this workshop to Dr. Lukman Nur Hakim as the moderator of this workshop. Thank you very much, and have or enjoy with your workshop. Thank you.
Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, selanjutnya adalah pengantar moderator dilanjutkan dengan workshop series. Selanjutnya acara kami serahkan kepada moderator Bapak Dr. Lukman Nur Hakim, SPSI MA, selaku peneliti muda Pusat Penelitian Badan Keahlian DPR RI. Kami silakan.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning to all of you. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semuanya. Om Swastiastu, Nama Budaya, Salam Kebajikan. Yang saya hormati Bapak Kepala Badan Keahlian DPR RI, Bapak Dr. Innocentius Samsul, SHM Hum. Yang saya hormati Bapak Ibu Kepala Pusat di BKD, yang tidak saya sebutkan satu persatu. Yang saya hormati ketiga orang panelis yang telah hadir pada hari ini, dan tentunya seluruh peserta workshop kita pada pagi hari ini. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Lukman Nur Hakim. I will be the moderator for this workshop. And actually, I'm one of the researcher in our parliamentary expertise agency, or in Bahasa, we call it Badan Keahlian Dewan, or abbreviated as BKD. Ladies and gentlemen, the big theme of our workshop is a workshop series on research-based legislative agenda, legislation, budgeting, and oversight functions. A week ago, we have held the first workshop, and the topic was research for legislative agenda. And today we have invited 3 panelists to discuss today's topic, that is good policy for paper for legislative agenda. And I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the 3 panelists who have spared their time to join us this morning. First is Ms. Desi Simanjuntak, PhD. She is Associate Research Fellow in ISEAS. And secondly, we have Mr. Dr. Indra Pahlevi, the head of Research Center in BKD. And the third is Mr. Dr. James Gomez from Asia Center. Dear panelists, normally the audience is approximately 300 people. I think it will reach that number after a few time. And then it consists of all the supporting unit in BKD. That is legal drafter, researcher, analyst, expert staff, and also some representative from the universities in Indonesia. And ladies and gentlemen, Parliamentary Expertise Agency, or in Bahasa Badan Keahlian Dewan, it's the supporting unit to the House of Representatives, or also for the member of the Parliament. We conduct research, we draft bills, we do some analysis, and we give support to the member of Parliament. And now we have the new chief in BKD, it is Mr. Dr. Innocentius Samsul, who keeps challenging us to keep improving how to support the House. And that is why today we are going to discuss about what is good policy paper and what kind of policy paper is good for the legislative agenda. And to answer those questions, we have invited 3 panelists. And for the first panelist, I would like to welcome Ms. Desi Simanjuntak, PhD. For you to know that Ms. Desi has completed her PhD in political anthropology from University of Amsterdam, and she has completed her master's degree in international relations also from University of Amsterdam, and she was graduated her bachelor degree from University of Indonesia, majoring in international relations, and currently she is the visiting research fellow for ISEAS, Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore, and also visiting research fellow for KAPAS, Center for Asia Pacific Area Studies. Goedemorgen, Miss Desi. Hoe gaat het? Spreekt u Nederlands?
Ja, goed zo, goed. Dankjewel.
Okay, please.
Sorry, Bu Desi, I'm sorry that I forgot to introduce one of the head of the center, our unit, Pak Helmizar. He is here now in our Zoom meeting. Bapak Helmizar is the head of the Center for State Finance Accountability. Selamat pagi Pak Helmizar. Maaf tadi lupa disebutkan. Thank you.
Okay, Miss Desi, the floor is yours.
Oke. Selamat pagi Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Salam sehat dari kami di Taipei, Taiwan. Terima kasih Bapak Inocencio Samsul atas undangannya terhadap saya. Sangat berbahagia sekali bisa berkontribusi kepada Badan Keahlian pada hari ini. Nama saya Desi Simanjuntak, saya sekarang peneliti tamu di Akademia Sinika Taiwan. Akademia Sinika itu badan riset nasional setingkat LIPI di Taiwan. Selain itu juga saya associate di Institute of Southeast Asian Studies di Singapura. Jadi, ISEAS itu juga badan riset dan juga think tank. Jadi kita dua hal ya, riset dan juga think tank. Jadi tugas kita juga mengeluarkan banyak policy papers untuk berbagai kalangan gitu. Kemarin saya dari pembicaraan dengan panitia, saya diminta untuk membawakan materi dalam bahasa Inggris saja. Jadi sesuai dengan tema kita hari ini, bagaimana menulis policy paper yang baik. Mungkin saya jangan bukan sebagai guru, tapi untuk sharing saja dengan rekan-rekan sekalian karena kita semua academic researcher di sini. Jadi saya sekarang mohon izin untuk membawakan dalam bahasa Inggris, ya, juga untuk mungkin mengasah kemampuan kita untuk menulis dalam bahasa Inggris nantinya. Okay, thank you very much for the time given. I'm going to share screen now. Let me see. Sharing this. Apakah sudah ada share screen saya?
Coming.
Belum ya? Oh ini sudah. Oh, nggak keluar ya?
It's there.
Keluar ya? Saya nggak kelihatan.
Sudah Mbak.
Sudah ya? Oke. Ya, tapi di saya nggak kelihatan. Oke. Ya, jadi ini bisa kelihatan ya?
Kelihatan, jelas.
Oke, ini judulnya, kita masuk ke dalam pembahasan sekarang. So, pertama kita menanyakan ya, what is a policy paper? What is a policy paper? So, the policy paper is the main communication tool used by policy specialists to disseminate the outcome of their policy investigation to the public policy community. Public policy community includes individuals or groups who have different or who have direct or indirect interest in the outcome of a policy decision. So, for example, stakeholders, government agencies, policy advisors, NGOs, community groups, and in your case, it's parliamentarians, legislators, or MPs. So, the policy paper is thus a problem-oriented and value-driven communication tool. It provides a comprehensive and persuasive argument justifying the policy recommendations presented in your paper, and act as a decision-making tool and call for action for the target audience. Who are the target audience? The ones that I already mentioned. So individuals or groups, or in your case, legislators. So policy papers are usually aimed at policymakers, but they can also be targeted, like I said, at legislators for the purpose of recommending a set of regulations. What we have to remember, yeah, because we are all academic researchers here, we have to remember that policy papers are not academic paper. So no theories, okay? So don't put theories in. Of course, you can clarify your definition, you know, using literature, but do not be discussing lengthily on theories. For example, don't talk about Foucault or Weber when you talk about government or for example. It is also not historical analysis, so you don't have to write everything in chronological order, like for example, in a historical academic paper. It is also not ideological arguments. What it is that a piece whose findings must be applied to the issue in question, who has a problem-solution relationship. So there is a problem, and you propose a solution, and then only relevant data is included. Please avoid including all the data and knowledge produced in the research process. We are academic researchers. We tend to really want everybody to know all of our data. So in policy papers, that doesn't work. You only put the data and knowledge that are relevant to your policy paper. It is also a value-driven argument. You take position on your preferred recommendations. So policy paper is not objective. It's not objective. It has an argument. It has you have to show your position. Yeah. But bearing in mind, your audience is highly politicized. In your case, they are already, you know, politicians, right? So they might already have their own opinions and preferences, and your aim is to perhaps sway, you know, their opinions by your arguments and your recommendations. So we go to the next slide now. So let's take a look at different types of policy paper, right? There are different types of policy paper. I'll introduce two main types today. The first one is policy studies. The second one is policy analysis. Policy studies seeks to understand and inform the policymaking process by carrying primary research. So if you are doing research and you are writing a policy paper based on your research, you are doing policy study, right? So, but the second type is policy analysis. This is more politically motivated and seeks to have direct influence on actual policy outcomes by designing policies for agencies. So the methodology is different than policy study. It can have a bit of primary research, the research that you do yourself, but it can also include analysis of the papers produced by other policy researchers. So policy analysis can use papers under policy study as part of their recommendation. Yeah. So if you look at the different, you know, if you look at the language, policy study has more technical language because the audience are policy specialists. They understand technical language. They understand jargon. So it's okay to use technical language in a policy study paper. And the length of the paper, it can be very long. It's around 20,000 words. So if it can, you know, look like a booklet, you know, like a small book. But policy analysis is short. It's not longer than 5,000 words, and a lot of them are around 1,500 words. What I write are usually 2,500 words. So before you write, you choose which one you want to write, which policy paper you want to write. You might want to ask yourself, who would you categorize your current policy work as policy study or policy analysis? What are you doing at the moment, right? Are you advising decision? Are you advising legislators, or are you writing full paper for other policy specialists? So, and the second question is, which stakeholders in your public policy community are interested in the policy issue that you're working on? So who will be interested in reading your paper? So that's the second thing you have to ask yourself. The third thing, who do you want to directly or indirectly communicate with through your policy paper? In your case, it's legislators. right? So I personally think that you're not doing policy study, but you're doing policy analysis. Okay, yes. Now that you have chosen which one you're going to write, let's take a closer look at the elements of the policy paper itself. In this case, I'm going to talk about the content of policy analysis. So the most common approach to writing a policy analysis is to follow this format. Of course, there's a title, right? There's a title, and then there's an executive summary. Let me see. Yes, executive summary. And then there's introduction, problem description, policy options, conclusion, and recommendations, appendices, bibliography, endnotes, or you might want to use footnotes. In my case, I always use footnotes. It's easier because people, when they read, they can directly see my references. Or it can also follow this structure for more brief policy papers, policy briefs, executive summary, context or scope of the problem, policy alternative or options, recommendations, appendices, and bibliography. So a very important element for a policy paper, which also differentiates it from an academic paper, is thus executive summary. This is very, very important. Yeah? What is it? The executive summary gives you the first opportunity for extensive communication with the reader. It aims at attracting the interest of the reader. In this case, it is a bit similar to abstract, but it is not an abstract because executive summary should attract even those who will not read the entire paper. So you see politicians, legislators, decision makers, they are all very busy people, so they might not have time to read your entire paper. So the executive summary can help them understand the issue even when they don't read the entire paper. So the executive summary also entices readers whose main interests are only in the outcomes of the study findings and proposed policy recommendations, such as decision makers. So the executive summary provides a synopsis of all main parts and findings. So you see, executive summary can stand alone. So if your reader does not have time to read your paper, they just read this executive summary and they got it. They get your argument. So what can we write in the executive summary? Executive summary structure usually correspond to the structure of the main body of the paper. It can contain the purpose of the paper, definition and description of the policy problem, evaluation of policy alternative, conclusion and recommendation. We are going to take a look at an example later. Notice that an executive summary contains a far more detailed discussion than an abstract. An abstract for an academic paper should be concise, right? Because potential readers want to quickly gain an understanding of the paper, but abstract only give overview of the paper without giving any detail. In contrast, policy paper, executive summary can be longer and can have a level of details that gives adequate information provided for readers who don't have time for reading the whole paper. So important thing to consider when writing an executive summary is bluff, B-L-U-F, not bluffing as in lying, but bottom line up front. What does this mean? This means your most important findings must already be written in that executive summary. All right, don't keep your finding to the end of the policy paper. It has to be in the front, right? This is different from academic paper because usually, you know, as academic researchers, we like to kind of, you know, build the tension, do it gradually, and then present our most important finding. That doesn't work with the policy paper. In a policy paper, executive summary, you begin paragraphs with conclusion. So provide instant gratification and do not you know, dilly-dally on how you work towards this conclusion. Another thing though, you should also not be too descriptive in your executive summary. Assume that readers has heard about it in the news already. So for example, I can take an example, what is happening in Southeast Asia at the moment, Myanmar military coup, right? So there's something going on in Myanmar, and then I think yesterday the government of Indonesia announced that it will ask ASEAN to pressure the military to honor its promise to do another election. So if looking at this and you think, okay, I would like to write a policy paper on what the Indonesian government should do to lead the ASEAN countries to mitigate the problems in Myanmar. So when we're writing policy paper about this thing, we don't have to write the whole, describe what happened in the whole coup, you know. So you don't have to say, oh, on the 1st of February, the military came into the Napitau, and we don't need to do that because it has already been widely reported in the media, right? So this is the checklist for drafting the executive summary. Executive summary. So have all the important points been covered? If this is all that your reader read, would she be able to discuss your argument and move forward with the policy debate? Is there a clear storyline corresponding to the paper? Have you framed the issues in a way that will be understandable? Are your recommendations logically feasible and convincing for your target audience? So so actually we don't really have time to make an executive summary today, but let's think about an executive summary. Like right now, you think about executive summary, you use 4 to 5 bullet points. Remember to BLUF. It's not a summary, not an abstract. Do not cut and paste key points of your paper to your executive summary. It is a standalone piece. It is a literary device that entices your reader into reading your paper. The job of executive summary is not to summarize, but to lure, ya, untuk menarik perhatian. Think of, for example, I'm thinking of Prolegnas Prioritas 2021. Ada RUU pemilu di situ, yang kemudian sekarang sudah ditolak berbagai partai, ya. Tapi there are 6 different options from Mahkamah Konstitusi. So if you want to write a policy paper on RUU pemilu, which are the best options in your opinion based on your research? The best options already you put it in the executive summary. Yeah. So that's how you approach bottom line up front. So let's take a look at some example of a policy brief and policy related article. I would like to share a screen now. Okay. Ini bisa dilihat nggak ya? Apa yang screen saya yang policy brief?
Terlihat jelas, Mbak.
Terlihat jelas ya. Coba sekarang saya oke. So this is what I think a very good policy brief. Policy brief is a policy paper that is very short, right? Policy analysis that is very short. So this one is by OECD, and its title is on bribery and corruption. Look at the executive summary. Look at these dots, these bullet points. Yeah. First bullet point, bottom line up front, clear statement: corruption raises the cost of doing business, reduces investment incentives, and undermines public values and government effectiveness. Sharp. One sentence. That's the finding of the research already on the front, right? Second bullet point, data. You see, about a quarter of businesses cite corruption as the main hindrance to doing business, and recently 88% of citizens, there's a little data there. Third bullet point, talking about KPK and TPR as good measures to eradicate corruption. So, fourth bullet point, recommendation 1. Indonesia needs to address gaps, integrity, and anti-corruption laws, blah, 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 blah. So there is a first recommendation. Yeah. Second recommendation, join OECD anti-bribery convention. So these bullet points are very clear. It conveys what is inside the paper. So then the people who don't have time to read the entire paper can understand what the paper is about by looking at this bullet point. And then the rest of the paper, you see what's the issue, that's the introduction. And then also you see that there is a data here in the form of a graph. There is an argument here. Why is this important for Indonesia? Policy recommendation. What should policymakers do? Again, 5 bullet points, 6 bullet points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Protect the policy cycle, strengthen the first line, ensure integrity, reinforce, ensure, improve. So it's all very clear.
Mbak Desi,
so,
izin bisa diulang share screen-nya yang contoh-contohnya.
Yang mana?
Yang contoh yang terakhir, Mbak.
Yang ini, policy brief.
Yang di atasnya ya?
Yang mana? Oh ini, yang bribery and corruption.
Yang OECD.
Ya,
yang contoh, Mbak.
Ya, aku sedang men-share itu.
Desi, you will have to
share sama kami di sini, boleh?
Aku dan teman-teman dari gambaran hasil koreksi Bapak.
Kami yang share screen.
Iya. Oh. Oke.
Yang contoh ya, Mbak ya?
Ya, yang contoh. Ya.
Ini dia, Mbak.
Ya. So, saya ulang lagi apa dari depan?
Silakan, Mbak.
Mengenai ini. Ya. Jadi, okay. So this is the first example of a policy brief that I think I find very interesting. I would like you to look at the executive summary here, all these bullet points. When I say bottom line upfront, you see the first bullet point is about the finding of their research. Corruption raises the cost of doing business, reduces investment incentive, undermines public values and government effectiveness. You see that it is sharp argument already on the first bullet point. So second bullet point contains data. You see that a quarter of businesses cite corruption as the main barrier to doing business. Recently, 88% of citizens. As you see, there's a little data there. And third bullet point is praising KPK and TPR. Yeah. So KPK and TPR, positive game changers in the country's fight against corruption. The fourth bullet point is first recommendation. Indonesia needs to address the gaps in integrity and anti-corruption laws, implementation to ensure continuing progress. That's the first recommendation. The second recommendation on the fifth bullet point, joining the OECD anti-bribery convention. So this executive summary conveys what is inside the paper, and if you don't have time to read the whole paper, you can still understand what the paper is about based on this bullet point. Right? So you see in the paper, you see what's the issue. What's the issue is the introduction of the paper. And then if we go to the second page, yeah, you see there's a data there using a graph comparing Indonesia and many other countries, Russia, Mexico, China, India, Brazil. And then the second page, you see on the second page, you will see the argument why it is important to maintain efforts towards corruption eradication in Indonesia. And then at the end of this paper, you can see a very important section, which is the policy recommendation section. What should policymakers do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Protect the policy, strengthen the first line, ensure integrity strategies, reinforce, ensure, improve. So it's very, very clear. So this is I think, an example of a very good, very interesting policy brief. And a second example, saya bisa minta yang nomor 2, Mas, untuk di sharing.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yes.
Menarik sekali Mbak Desi, sambil menunggu kawan saya menampilkan yang slide kedua, saya tadi mendengarkan apa bluff, itu menarik sekali ya, bukan bluffing tapi bottom line upfront ya, itu menarik sekali. Nah ini yang contoh yang kedua, silakan Mbak Desi.
Nah ini contoh kedua yang saya bawa, this is a second example. It is a longer policy related article. I wrote this in 2017. About how to develop Natuna Island economy, Natuna di Kepri ya, Kabupaten Natuna di Kepri. So if you look at the executive summary, if you can scroll down, did I scroll down? Can I scroll down? I don't know. Okay, so I only use 4 bullet points there. Yeah. So the first bullet points, can we go to the executive summary, please? Yeah. So the first bullet point is on why is it important to talk about the economy of Natuna? Oh, because it has a strategic importance for Indonesia. The second bullet point, what's the problem? Natuna district is poor. Why is it poor? Because it's very dependent on central government transfer payments despite having a very rich energy resources, right? That's very weird. Natuna is very rich, but also at the same time, very poor, right? So revenues from each energy projects of the district go to central government or province and not to the kabupaten, not to the district. The third bullet points, another problem. There's a pull for Natuna district to separate from Kepri province. So, I was talking about usaha pemekaran yang gagal tahun 2017 ya. So and then my fourth bullet point is my recommendation, which is to revise Indonesia's complex system of intergovernmental transfer payments, particularly for energy-producing districts. This is going to, what I think is going to improve Natuna's economy. So if we scroll down this policy article, you see there's an introduction in which I introduce how the government is committed to develop the country's border regions, including Natuna. And look at how the article uses footnote. I use footnote instead of endnotes. And then if you go through the third page, you see a map you see a map there. I put Natuna Energy, where Natuna Energy blocks are, sharing how important Natuna is, especially Natuna D Alpha block, which has the world's largest gas sources in the world, and which is also on the area where China claims it has a 9-dash line territory. In this section, I also describe how rich the Natuna Islands are, but why are they still dependent on central government transfer, which is DBH, DAU, dan DAK. And then if we go on the article, 4th page, 5th page, I continue talking about how rich it is, and yeah, and then I describe Natuna's dependence on central government transfer. I compare with Batam, Bintan, and Karimun's PDRB daerah. Also, then in the next section, I argue that the government's calculation of this is the percentage of RGDP by industry in Natuna. If we go on, we can see my argument that why Natuna keeps being poor. It's because there is a calculation of DBH migas, which is a bit funny for district that has energy potentials. If we look at the 8th page, if we go on, so these are 2,500 words. If we go on, yeah. I want to show you the table. We should go on actually. So my argument is that the calculation of DBH migas is making Natuna, is depriving Natuna of the income that it can get actually from the gas and oil sources that it has in its territory, because there is a calculation of if the wells are offshore by 12 miles, then the money goes to the government and the provincial government. So Natuna kept getting very small amount of the income from its own gas. So, and at the end of the paper, I propose a solution, a policy recommendation, that if we cannot change the calculation that we have on DBH migas, this is the calculation of DBH migas, then we should focus on other sectors such as fishery and tourism, as well as to increase effectivity in licensing authorities to decrease confusion and encourage investment. So this is one of my policy paper that I made in 2017. I made some other policy paper, but I think this can serve as an example of how a longer policy paper look like. So I think I'll stop here because I think I have used more than the time allocated to me. Thank you very much. If there's a question, then I will be very happy to answer it in the question and answer section.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Mbak Desi, penjelasannya sangat menarik ya. Tadi dikatakan bahwasanya kita harus melihat siapa yang audiens kita, lalu kita harus menaruh teori di sana gitu ya. Kemudian yang tadi menarik yang saya highlight juga, policy paper is not an objective paper. Itu menarik, itu bisa jadi diskusi yang menarik. Kemudian we begin with conclusion ya. Kemudian banyak menggunakan bullets ya, itu memang lebih mudah di digest buat MPs ya dengan menggunakan bullets. And oke, terima kasih banyak buat Mbak Desi. Nanti kita akan lanjutkan diskusi kita di sesi 2. Bos saya ini Dr. Indra Pahlepi SIP. Beliau ini jurusan ilmu pemerintahan di UGM, kemudian melanjutkan S2-nya di Pasca Sarjana Fisip UI. Kemudian doktornya di Pasca Sarjana Ilmu Politik Fisip UI juga, memulai karir di Harian Bernas Yogyakarta, salah satu harian yang sangat populer. Kemudian bekerja di Sekjen DPR RI, dan sejak tahun 2015 menjadi Kepala Pusat Penelitian DPR RI. Kepada Bapak Indra kami persilakan.
Terima kasih moderator Pak Dr. Lukman. Morning Dr. James. Selamat pagi Bu Desi, Pak Kamban, para kapus. seluruh.
Pak Indra suaranya belum masuk, masih di mute.
Sudah? Halo?
Oke, sudah jelas Pak.
Ya. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
buat kita semua. Morning Dr. James, Bu Desi, Pak Kepala Badan, para kapus, dan seluruh peserta. Semoga kita semua tetap dalam keadaan sehat. Izinkan saya menyampaikan dalam bahasa Indonesia dan mohon bantuan panitia atau host untuk bisa share screen.
Sudah Pak.
Nah, persoalannya saya di sini tidak bisa lihat, kenapa ya?
Mungkin digeser ke view-nya Pak. View-nya digeser ke kanan.
Tetap nggak ada, Pak.
Atau kita share screen dari sini, Pak Indra silakan buka file sendiri dari sana, nanti instruksikan
Baik.
aja page berapa.
Baik. Sebetulnya yang saya sampaikan mungkin tidak lebih banyak daripada Bu Desi yang sangat komprehensif dan memiliki pengalaman yang luar biasa di riset center beliau ya. Tapi mungkin saya ingin melihat dari perspektif internal kita juga ya. Selain audiens sebagian besar adalah rekan-rekan fungsional di lingkungan Badan Keahlian, termasuk tenaga ahli, juga pengetahuan atau informasi kepada Bapak Ibu yang dari luar DPR. Saya awali memang ini sangat umum, klasik ya, bahwa DPR punya 3 fungsi, yaitu legislasi, anggaran, dan pengawasan, dan ini perlu dukungan yang tadi disampaikan oleh Pak Kepala Badan dari yang namanya Badan Keahlian yang ada 5 pusat itu. Bagaimana cara memberikan dukungannya? Yang paling utama dan terutama ya, adalah dukungan yang bersifat substansi tetapi mudah untuk diterima langsung oleh para anggota. Sebagai perkenalan awal, ini kami di pusat penelitian memang punya visi dan misi yang saya pikir sangat ideal dan normatif, tetapi ini adalah sebuah cita-cita ya, yaitu pusat penelitian yang profesional tentu, karena kami berasal dari kalangan akademisi tentu ya, artinya yang berkecimpung di dunia akademik, para peneliti, lalu netral atau imparsial tadi, andal dan akuntabel dalam mendukung terwujudnya parlemen modern. Ini sebuah gagasan besar yang sudah digaungkan sejak periode sebelumnya oleh pimpinan DPR. Lanjut, produk di pusat penelitian yang paling utama ada beberapa. Yang ini juga sebetulnya bagian dari dukungan dalam bentuk policy brief yang diberikan kepada DPR. Yang pertama info singkat, ya. Lalu ada jurnal, lalu ada buku-buku baik individu maupun tim, lalu ada jurnal juga yang lebih ringkas yang namanya parliamentary review, artinya membahas satu isu dilihat dari perspektif DPR dan beberapa sudut pandang keilmuan yang ada di pusat penelitian. Dan terakhir adalah isu sepekan, ini baru berjalan beberapa bulan ini, tetapi trialnya sudah 1 tahun yang lalu. Ini weekly issues yang kami sampaikan, memang analisisnya sangat singkat, tetapi memberikan gambaran kepada anggota, terutama pimpinan DPR, seperti apa isu yang berkembang di tengah masyarakat atau di media. Berikutnya adalah apa saja layanan atau pelayanan pusat penelitian atau kegiatan pusat penelitian. Ini yang terkadang memang tidak banyak orang tahu di belakang di halayak ya, bahwa sejak berdirinya pusat penelitian ini
atau dulu yang namanya bidang pengkajian dan analisis di tahun 90 berdiri, lalu 94, 95 establish, itu directly langsung attach kepada komisi-komisi, pimpinan, dan seluruh alat kelengkapan. Bahkan termasuk di dalamnya waktu awal-awal berdiri itu adalah membantu mengidentifikasi persoalan, membuat daftar pertanyaan ketika rapat kerja dan rapat dengar pendapat, dan membuat semacam pandangan fraksi. Karena waktu itu fraksinya juga memang masih sedikit, masih 4 ya, fraksi Karya Pembangunan, fraksi ABRI, fraksi P3, dan fraksi PDI. Tentu membuat pidato juga, lalu ikut juga merancang draft rancangan undang-undang di awal reformasi, ya, sebelum ada teman-teman legal drafter, kita tes di Badan Legislasi, dulu namanya Panitia Legislasi, dan terus ikut dalam pembahasan beberapa rancangan undang-undang, baik inisiatif maupun rancangan undang-undang yang datang dari pemerintah. Jadi pendampingan, dan sekarang alhamdulillah sudah berkolaborasi, ya, kita ada pusat perancangan undang-undang di Badan Keahlian, itu kita ikut mensupport dalam rangka penyusunan akademik dan penyusunan draft RUU. Lalu dan dalam rangka meningkatkan layanan, kami juga sudah punya sistem data informasi penelitian yang bisa diakses oleh siapapun, mencari hasil-hasil dari penelitian yang diproduce oleh para peneliti, mulai dari utama yang sangat senior sampai peneliti-peneliti pertama yang baru masuk. Lalu, fokus policy brief atau policy paper yang harus diberikan pada DPR, ini harus melihat karakteristik yang dimiliki oleh lembaga ini sebagai lembaga politik. Pusat penelitian sebagai supporting system itu tentu harus fully supported ke dalam 3 fungsi tersebut. Walaupun untuk anggaran tentu domain utamanya ada di pusat kajian anggaran dan pusat kajian akuntabilitas, tetapi kami juga punya peneliti ekonomi. Tapi di 2 fungsi yang lain, yang legislasi dan apalagi pengawasan, itu kami sangat terlibat di dalam proses-proses yang terjadi, tentu dengan tetap menjaga profesionalitas dan imparsialitas. Karakteristiknya adalah kebutuhan di DPR itu harus cepat direspon. Seperti kemarin masukan dari beberapa anggota komisi, baik komisi 10 terutama dan komisi 5, ya, itu kita minta untuk cepat. Jangan sampai kalah dengan pemerintah, jangan sampai isunya sudah lewat, kajiannya baru ada. Oleh karena itu, kita tindak lanjuti seperti dengan isu sepekan, ya, dan info singkat itu. 2 minggu sekali atau 2 pekan sekali. Isu yang disoroti tentu isu-isu aktual dan kebijakan-kebijakan pemerintah yang mendapat perhatian atau sorotan masyarakat. Nah, policy brief atau policy paper, ya, itu bentuk pelayanan yang cepat. Kalau di penelitian, hasil penelitian kami sajikan dalam bentuk infografis, ya, dan secara tertulisnya dan dicetak, itu juga kami buat dalam ringkasan eksekutif yang kami sampaikan kepada alat kelengkapan di seluruh DPR ini, baik Komisi 1 maupun sampai 11 maupun badan-badan yang membutuhkan. Kita sedikit masuk ke dalam policy brief. Saya pikir definisi semua sudah tahu menurut saya, bahwa tadi sudah dikatakan oleh Bu Desi juga sudah sangat jelas ya, bahwa itu dokumen yang menggunakan dasar rasional dalam pemilihan sebuah alternatif kebijakan khusus atau rangkaian tindakan dalam sebuah kebijakan saat ini. Dokumen singkat yang ditujukan kepada para pengambil kebijakan, dalam hal ini tentu para anggota DPR, berisi gambaran singkat, padat, dan bersifat non-partisan, tadi juga disampaikan oleh Bu Desi, yang berupa hasil riset dan analisis yang spesifik terhadap suatu isu dan dapat menjadi suatu masukan terhadap suatu kebijakan. Apa pentingnya policy brief? Dia tentu harus menyampaikannya secara lugas ya. Oleh karena itu dia punya 4 karakter, singkat dan mudah dibaca. Policy brief itu penting. Jadi memungkinkan para pengambil kebijakan membaca secara cepat hasil analisis sehingga dapat menjadi masukan dan alternatif kebijakan. Cepat dan cepat kata kuncinya, singkat dan mudah dibaca. Lalu bahan evaluasi yang cepat. Tulisan yang singkat memungkinkan para pengambil kebijakan mengambil langkah cepat dalam menentukan arah kebijakan berikutnya. Di DPR ini kan isunya terus berganti, hampir setiap pekan. Beberapa pekan terakhir ini misalnya isu RUU ITE. Tentu harus cepat direspon oleh kita dengan memberikan apa yang seharusnya. Pemerintah sudah membentuk tim khusus di bawah Kemenko Polhukam misalnya. Lalu pentingnya policy brief juga itu sebagai diseminasi dan distribusi informasi yang mudah. Hari-hari ini kita sudah banyak media sosial, ya. Oleh karena itu sarana diseminasi policy brief yang sangat efektif. Semua pusat di Badan Keahlian sudah memiliki media-media sosial, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Kalau website tentu sudah punya, ya. Itu menjadi sarana yang efektif untuk menyampaikan atau mendiseminasi produk-produk hasil analisis singkat kita. Yang berikutnya adalah tidak bias. Ini penting karena kita bekerja di lembaga politik, tentu terkadang ada tuduhan-tuduhan dari politisi misalnya, karena analisisnya lebih berpihak kepada kelompok tertentu. Tentu memang tidak bisa memuaskan semua pihak, tetapi kita coba untuk tetap tidak bias. Tahap awal penulisan policy brief, yaitu perencanaan dan pemetaan target audien. Tentu audiennya jelas, anggota DPR yang hari ini 9 fraksi, dan tentu banyak kepentingan yang ada di situ. Pertama adalah identifikasi isu kebijakan. Yang tadi saya sampaikan, seperti apa isunya. Lalu beberapa peneliti atau fungsional lain yang di bidangnya itu tentu membuat identifikasi itu. Lalu mengembangkan dialog 2 arah dan keterlibatan dengan para aktor pengambil kebijakan. Bisa saja kita berkomunikasi dengan politisi tersebut, kira-kira seperti apa isu kebijakan yang perlu diangkat, tapi dari kami seperti ini, itu bisa. Sehingga seperti kayak Komisi 10 kemarin, kita tentang penelitian tentang kurikulum, tentang peta jalan pendidikan, tenaga guru honorer, dan lain sebagainya. Misalnya. Yang ketiga adalah menciptakan tim komunikasi dan diseminasi. Tentu ini kalau di Puslit ada bidang-bidang, ada 5 bidang, dan di dalam bidang juga ada beberapa sub-sub kepakaran yang tentu itu menjadi satu tim kecil yang bisa dikembangkan. Yang berikutnya adalah mengidentifikasi target audien yang relevan. Kalau ini tentu sudah jelas ya, bahwa target audiennya adalah anggota DPR. Meskipun audien atau publik juga, masyarakat juga bisa, dan termasuk pemerintah juga bisa kita tujukan di dalam rekomendasi tersebut. Hal penting dalam penulisan policy brief. Yang pertama, policy brief harus terstruktur dan mudah dibaca tadi. Memastikan bahwa informasi penting tersaji pada halaman pertama. Jadi halaman pertama, bahkan judul itu menjadi sangat penting, agar supaya itu menjadi perhatian dari audiens. Lalu jumlah halaman. Ini menjadi penting meskipun teknis. Itu dapat bervariasi namun tidak lebih dari 2-4 halaman. Kalau di info singkat itu 5 halaman, ya. Meskipun nanti di format ulang itu menjadi lebih singkat. Atau 1.500 kata lebih kurang. Dan fokus pada satu topik yang spesifik, tidak lari kemana-mana. Jadi fokus info brief atau policy brief itu harus jelas. Berikutnya komponen policy brief. Pertama ringkasan eksekutif, ya, atau bisa juga abstrak, lalu masalahnya apa, lalu latar belakangnya apa, dan kebijakan terdahulunya seperti apa. Itu singkat-singkat saja. Lalu berikutnya adalah apa pilihan kebijakan yang diambil. Jadi kebijakan terdahulu dan latar belakang masalah ini memuat data dan fakta tentu ya dari yang ada. Lalu pilihan kebijakannya apa yang terbaik, dan ada analisis keuntungan dan kelemahan dari pilihan-pilihan kebijakan yang disampaikan. Di beberapa produk kami, seperti info singkat, parliamentary review itu sudah mengedepankan hal tersebut. Lalu rekomendasinya. Rekomendasinya apa yang perlu diambil oleh para pengambil kebijakan, dan terakhir tentu sumber data yang perlu disampaikan. Dari mana data-data itu diperoleh, atau rujukan atau referensi. Ini format policy brief yang mungkin ideal ya, dan kita sudah coba untuk terapkan. Judul yaitu informatif dan singkat, lalu ringkasan eksekutif atau abstrak ya. Itu lebih kurang 150 kata, berisi tujuan dan rekomendasi singkat. Diharapkan bagian ini mampu mempersuasi dan menarik minat pembaca untuk melangkah lebih lanjut setelah selesai menyusun policy brief. Lalu ada pendahuluan semacam pengantar tadi yang saya sampaikan. Lalu metode riset ya. Kalau dia memang hasil riset itu disampaikan seperti apa risetnya. Lalu kesimpulan, apa rekomendasinya, dan terakhir adalah daftar implikasi dan rekomendasi dari rekomendasi itu apa, dan terakhir daftar referensi atau sumber data. Ini tips saja, mungkin saling berbagi, share knowledge ya, karena saya yakin Bapak Ibu sekalian peserta para fungsional ini sudah sangat paham. Tentu bahasa yang digunakan itu tidak bertele-tele, singkat, padat, dan jelas. Yang kedua menggunakan kalimat aktif. Ini walaupun teknis memang menjadi sangat penting karena terkadang kita sendiri yang menulis itu karena style kita memang seperti itu, kadang kalimat-kalimatnya bersayap atau beranak pinak gitu ya. Lalu penekanan pada hal-hal yang dapat mempengaruhi pengambilan kebijakan. Mengantisipasi hal-hal yang dapat menjadi pertanyaan bagi pembaca dan tentu bersifat netral. Teknis kedua adalah desain dan tata letak policy brief. Ini template juga menjadi penting. Kalau menarik tentu akan dicari, akan dilihat ya. Lalu membagi teks ke dalam paragraf yang pendek, menggunakan subjudul untuk membagi tulisan. Saya pikir di produk-produk puslit sudah tampak itu ya, seperti di info singkat dan parliamentary review, dan juga isu sepekan yang sudah kita diseminasi melalui Instagram juga. Lalu menggunakan penomoran, gambar, dan tabel untuk menghemat kata. Ini penting, ini lebih komunikatif dan informatif. Dan penekanan kata dan kalimat dapat menggunakan cetak tebal atau cetak miring. Terakhir, sebelum selesai, kapan policy brief itu kita buat? Policy brief sebaiknya dibuat segera setelah riset selesai, dilakukan untuk menjaga momentum. Apalagi kalau risetnya itu adalah permintaan AKD, maka seharusnya sebelum laporan lengkapnya itu selesai, tentu policy briefnya berupa infografis atau ringkasan eksekutifnya itu harus sudah selesai segera setelah penelitian itu selesai atau kajian itu selesai. Lalu policy brief juga dapat dibuat ketika ada isu krusial. Nah, ini yang tiba-tiba mendadak ada isu-isu tertentu, hot issue ya di beberapa bidang misalnya, maka harus segera dibuat dan perlu ditindaklanjuti. Itu salah satu tugas kita juga. Diseminasi dan distribusi policy brief. Tentu tepat target dan tepat sasaran ya. Sekali lagi di DPR politisi harus seperti kita memberikan feeding kepada para politisi sebagai alternatif kebijakan terhadap kebijakan-kebijakan atau isu-isu yang ada di masyarakat. Lalu tindak lanjutnya seperti apa? terkadang beberapa kali teman-teman penulis peneliti itu diminta konfirmasinya di telepon atau di email oleh para anggota yang membaca policy brief itu, baik info singkat maupun parliamentary review. Yang berikutnya adalah proaktif. Kalau memang diperlukan pendalaman, bisa dilakukan seminar atau webinar. Lalu kerjasama antar instansi juga dapat dilakukan untuk membahas policy brief yang telah dibuat. Dan terakhir adalah tentu penggunaan media sosial dan internet yang tentu hari-hari ini kita akan menuju ke sana sebagai bagian dari, kalau di DPR itu adalah mewujudkan parlemen modern. Demikian moderator, Pak Lukman, mudah-mudahan waktunya tidak terlalu panjang dan mudah dipahami. Saya kembalikan kepada moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak Bapak Indra. Tadi Pak Indra telah menyampaikan mungkin untuk Mr. James ya. Mr. Indra is DPR, and we have products. We have products like weekly and every 2 weeks journals, books, which is to support the substance for the MPs. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Indra. And for our third panelist is Mr. Dr. James Gomez. I will inform you brief about Mr. Gomez. Mr. Gomez has over 25 years serving leadership roles in international NGOs, intergovernmental organizations, public and private universities, research institute, and think tanks. And he has worked full-time in many countries, in Australia, in China, Bangladesh, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Sweden, Thailand, and the UK. And he has finished his Doctor of Philosophy from Monash University, Australia, his Master of Art from University of Essex, UK, and Bachelor of Social Science from National University of Singapore. Mr. James, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone. Firstly, to recognize Dr. Innocentius for his kind invitation and friendship over the last few years. Esteemed panelists, Dr. Indra and Dr. Desi, who have given us a lot of technical knowledge. Thank you, Dr. Lukman, for your kind moderation, and your excellencies and expert participants who are joining us virtually. What I want to do, since as you can see between the first and second speaker, there is some positive overlap that strengthens our understanding of policy paper. I want to kind of slightly value add to the dimension and introduce you or invite you to think about the regional and international dimensions and implication of writing policy papers. My background in writing policy papers comes from working with intergovernmental organizations. Although I have not been a parliamentarian, I have been an active member of political parties in Singapore. And for some years, I have also headed the policy unit within political parties and, drafting policy papers that way. So bringing to it a mixture of it. And finally, Asia Center works with several international and regional parliamentarian groups that approach policies either from a values or thematic basis. So moving along, these are some of the products that Asia Center puts together. If you see in the top row, we have a range of books. Our books are a bit different in the sense that they are not academically inclined, in the sense that discussing theory, but they tend to be more for practitioners. So they have a kind of a recommendation focus. So we look at a whole range of topics in the region, and we invite people from different country and thematic expertise to contribute, and Dr. Innocentius actually contributed to one of the series. In the second row, you see a range of documents. These are what we call baseline studies from which we formulate a range of policy products. And we have worked on quite a few issues such as disinformation, hate speech, fake news, the impact of COVID-19, just to name a few. In terms of Asia Center working regionally and internationally for policy intervention, these are the instruments that we use. Baseline studies, policy paper, policy brief that we have heard, and also briefing notes. And who are the people we work with? We work with parliamentarian networks. These can be country-based, like the engagement we have now. Mostly we work with the research entity within the parliament. And then we work with INGOs and also UN agencies. So I thought one of the things, I can touch on is really the 5 stages of policy formulation. It really depends on where you are, what institution, and how you get to think about it. The first thing is setting the agenda. How is the agenda set? Is it set because of public issues? There's a crisis in issue. Is it set? You're forced to consider it because of international issues such as climate change. And then formulation, how do we, and a lot of it is around the research, the actual, drafting of the policy. And then 3, the adaptation, right? Whether it's by an organization or by parliament. And for me, a lot of the implementation and administration is then moving to the legislative process. And then we evaluate what is the effect. Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. And then we also need to consider that, at the end of the evaluation, a policy may be improved, or sometimes it may be terminated. So next, I want to draw a distinction between policy and legislation. Even though they are interrelated, it's always good to keep in mind a policy is a principle or a course of action that an organization or individual want to pursue in this context, a national parliament. And then legislation, is the next step, really the drafting. How do we go about, translating the policy into law, right? And then we will have to look at what are the laws before, and, how do we want to move forward, and also the jurisprudence of it, and where does that sit in terms of society's own evolution. So here, I want to introduce maybe 5 products of where Asia Center operates. It always starts with a baseline study. And one of our very well-received and downloaded several hundred times is our paper on hate speech. Because of COVID-19, because of anxiety within communities, because of the pressures on economy, a lot of negative emotions came out in many societies in Southeast Asia. So we were asked to put together a baseline study about what are the key issues related to hate speech. So we need to consider the impact of COVID-19 as well as technology. And what we found out is hate speech had expanded. It had expanded beyond our traditional understanding of having hate speech around divisions of race and religion. We've discovered 3 other dimensions, which was, hate speech along gender. We recognize hate speech, kind of an anti-foreigner hate speech, linked with refugee, migrant workers. And finally, we also identify political hate speech, where, different competing groups generate, unhealthy, comments, and that creates tension with us. The purpose was just to try to bring down the tone so it doesn't give rise to violence in society. So the conclusion of this initial baseline study was, 1, to identify there were different and new forms of hate speech, spurred because of online issues, as well as the impact of COVID-19. And our primary recommendation was really that states consider broadening the definition of hate speech and move away or enhance current legislation and policies and non-legal measures that only focus on, calming things down on race and religion. So we found that, having a baseline study before we actually go into policy drafting is quite helpful. So this is one, product that came out of it. So here, this product is a policy paper. It's regional. It covers both East and Southeast Asia. And we did this for the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats. So this is a network of political parties and parliamentarians, both in East and Southeast Asia, who are looking at policy formulations that provide some respect for the notion of freedom of expression. So in particular, we looked at the issue of emerging legislation around fake news in the region. So we looked at fake news legislation in the region, and we found out where were the issues. And again, we found there were two things. In countries that were, had one single dominant political force in its legislature and did not have independent institution, it took a more central approach. So the state defined what was fake news, and a lot of time, because of the absence of clear checks and balances, there led to be an abuse or political use of fake news legislation. And quite a few countries in Southeast Asia fall into the category. If you go to East Asia, and I'm going to, and this study did not cover China, you'll find most of the other countries such as Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong even, they had more, multi-party legislatures, and they also had independent institutions like human rights institution, a strong judiciary that provided the check and balance and ensures protections were in place. I will, just briefly go through policy brief, and Pa Indra had, delved deeply into it. He also briefly mentioned briefing notes. We recently were asked to put a short briefing note for regional actors about what was happening in Myanmar. In particular, they were concerned about how the military use countrywide internet shutdowns, and what was the behavior, what was the methodology, what kind of laws they looked at to justify that, what was the reaction of people on the ground, what was the reaction of international community, what was the reaction of the technology company, because there was an immediate concern that other states in the region which have been using internet shutdowns in a very localized way may soon pick up on this behavior and maybe take a sort of a country national approach. And what are the sort of issues and challenges, right? And finally, I will also introduce a very British approach that sometimes when the policy is kind of thought through, a white paper is released. Usually it's to just, announce government intention, but also to test public opinion and collect feedback as a way of moving into the legislative process. So here I want to kind of sort of, turn the wheel towards considerations. So when we are drafting, any form of policy product, in a national context, a lot of the concern will be around, the political parties and the composition of legislature. So sometimes it's useful to be in touch with the policy unit of different political parties. It's also interesting that many parliamentarians are members of different parliamentarian networks. So it'll be also interesting to be aware or have a schedule within Parliament about, okay, which parliamentarian from which party is part of which network. Is it a values-based network? Is it regional network? Is it an international network, around, particular themes related to promotion of gender or some other mental health, whatever the issue. So you have a bit of a mapping, and that would also offer you good inputs. But I think the most important thing that most researchers in parliaments do not consider upfront, they certainly consider it, but maybe not in an upfront way, is what are the international obligations, right? And this becomes also a little bit tricky and political. What are the treaty body mechanisms? What are the commitments the country has made, let's say, for the Universal Periodic Review, treaty bodies with special procedures, or even the SDGs? And at a national level, we often consider alignment with the Constitution. But what about alignment with international standards? And is this alignment, honest, clear, practical? What are the political considerations? And how do you answer to when you are asked to respond to international queries about, legislation? Do you align? If you don't align, what are the political explanations one provides? So it's good to have that, perspective. Here, I think both colleagues have, taken through a structure. So I will just highlight a couple of things. It really depends on the culture of different institutions. So copyright, preface, acknowledgements, abbreviation. I think our colleague Desi took you on a deep dive with executive summary, which I thought was very good. Introduction, setting up the issues. And here in the body, this is where, when we talk about background, right, we can talk about whether, what are the international obligations, what are laws, what laws, existing laws or past laws you speak to in terms of domestic legislation, what is the legal analysis, what's the gap, and are you considering the impact on rights, deliverables, particular, type of society? So in terms of recommendations, while we are, kind of parliamentarian focused for this community of participants in this workshop, I just want to demonstrate that, in the work that we do, we also have recommendations for international partners, governments, and civil society. So when we do a baseline study, we often provide recommendations to these different stakeholders. So what we do next after that is when we are told, okay, we want this to be developed further for parliamentarians, then we, draw from the baseline study and then develop recommendations more in terms of what parliamentarians can use. And of course, policy briefs and others can come naturally after that. And again, similarly, we also, talk about audience. So what is your audience? Apart from the fact that, at a national level, it's often the parliamentarians, government agencies, public and media as a disseminator, and also civil society. I think it's also good to think about the international community. So that's the end of the presentation, and I was hoping really to kind of value add and build on the two colleagues, and I will stop sharing my screen now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. James. And ladies and gentlemen, we have get some questions from the audiences, and I think we will start with the first three questions. Actually, we can see from the chat forum there are already some questions. Dear panelists, now we are going to go to the session for question and answers. For the first question is from Mr. Toku. He is a budget analyst, and his question is, what specifically differentiates between research, study, and analysis? This is important to understand because the DPRRE expertise body has functional positions consisting of researchers, drafters of laws, and analysts. That is from Mr. Teguh. I think it can be for all panelists. And the second question is from Iva Hasana. He's an expert staff from Komisi 9. And the question is, thank you for materials. And her question is, working in DPR Commission, we are exposed to first-hand information. Is indeed a very good source for policy paper. How do we start to make one? And how do we decide our audience? Thank you. That is, I think, for Mr. James and also Mbak Desi. And also, she asks about my take is then how using policy brief to support DPR, reaching out to the general audience. That is from Ibu Iva Hasana. And the third is from Mbak Rastri Paramita. The question is, what is the root of the problem in policy making in Indonesia? And for all panelists, if we have to compare a policy brief on issue for members, the ideal form of policy brief that is prepared to put forward goals for the benefit of the community or to fulfill the political wishes of the members requesting it. And that second question is for all the panelists, and the first question is especially for Mbak Desi. I think for the first session, we are only for 3 questions. Okay, I think Ms. Desi can start to answer the questions.
Yeah, I think I've already answered the question by typing, but I think Mbak Iva kind of clarified her question, and it's directed to reach out on audience outside of the parliament, since some non-parliament stakeholders are not aware of the DPR's work. I don't really understand. So from what I gathered is that policy brief that the Badan Keahlian task is to produce policy brief to support DPR, right? So I think the audience is pretty clear that it is DPR. So, but if you are making a policy, but because policy briefs always have an audience, and it's either decision makers or NGOs or, you know, so then you would have to kind of form your policy brief based on, you know, your audience, obviously. I mean, form your the language that you use, and also what is the issue that you want to address, basically. So that's my answer to the question. Oh yeah, and a second thing, it has to always be based on a research, right? So it cannot be just, it cannot come from out of nowhere, right? It needs to have a research base, or it needs to based on an analysis on the things that are happening. And like Pa Indra said, it needs to be very quickly produced so that we don't lose the momentum. So I think it's a very good reminder for all of us making policy briefs.
Okay, Mr. James, maybe you want to add something?
From our experience, you know, our approach to policy brief really is to streamline the recommendations outside of our general baseline study to the particular stakeholder. So for us, the baseline study is the one that, you know, speaks to several stakeholders. And if it's for the parliamentarians, you know, we tend to then, you know, frame the brief according to that, you know, sort of audience. So that's kind of, you know, in terms of technical approach, that's how we do. We consider one other element when it comes to parliamentarians. It is the law. So where is the gap that, you know, they want to address? So sometimes, you know, we need to work with the drafters, the legal drafters, and this is where they are very, very important because it's, after all, a teamwork, and they can provide the language in those kinds of, you know, outputs.
Great. Okay. Actually, there's also I saw a raised hand from one of the participants. The next, I will give the time for Kak Riris. Yeah, Kak Riris. I think she has raised her hand.
Well,
Before, please, Kak Riris.
my name is Partogi Nanggolan. I use the Zoom facilities from Riris computer. Well, thank you very much. Nice to meet you, Desi. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think you have worked for a long time for Jakarta Post, right? If I'm not mistaken, as a journalist, is that right?
Sorry?
Sorry. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, I think you have worked for a long time for Jakarta Post. Is that right?
No, no, I haven't. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a comment from me. I have a quite different views with you. You said that we need to directly present our findings at the beginning. But I am afraid you will miss objectivity if you don't want to discuss the pro, the cons, views on both sides from negative and also positive aspects. So, do you see this problem? Because I think I can understand linking this with your experiences, past experiences. You haven't working, I mean, you never work in parliament, dealing with different ideas and dealing with specific clients. But referring to Dr. Gomez presentation, he said, yes, I agree with, we will deal with always with specific policy. But how to answer this? I think we must start by using step by step. Let's say it's methodology, because this is also a scientific paper, right? So I think we don't need to put the findings or our arguments at the beginning, but put it in after making a lot of discussion. So you need to make firstly to present balancing views from different sides of views. So how do you deal with these problems? Yeah, without missing objectivity and impartiality, the most important one. And now the next one to Dr. Gomez, after giving this question to Dr. Simanjuntak. Yeah, Dr. Gomez, you have worked with politicians, but I'm not sure whether you have also working in parliament, facing with different factions, and must answer their request. You have mentioned about specific policies, but if different MPs send you requests, different requests, will you subject to their need? I mean, to their subjectivity interests, or you still keep your professionalism, impartiality? So I need to know your explanation about this, because it's quite different with to face more than 4 or 5 factions, different factions in the parliament. And another one, this is the last one, I think. Well, you said about white papers. How can we make a good white papers? Yeah, at the, you have explained a little bit, but how can we make a good white papers at the time we face with many fake news, hoax, or the so-called fire hose of disinformation. So thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, thank you, Professor Partogi Nainggolan. I'm sorry, I was mistakenly call you Miss Riz because the name was Miss Riz. Okay, I think the question was for Miss Daisy and also Mr. James Gomez. Okay, I think Miss Daisy can answer first.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Professor Nainggolan, for your question. Actually, maybe I didn't say it clearly. I didn't say that we should not present the pros and cons and other kinds of policy alternatives. Actually, on the contrary, in the body of the policy paper, you need to say, you know, these are the policy options, but I think the best one is this one, right? So the choice of policy option, that's the one that goes to the executive summary, yeah. Then within the executive summary, you can actually mention a bit that it is a result of, you know, your choice and a result of your what's that? Your research. Your research produces your opinion, that the opinion is that this policy course is the best one, and that's the one that you put on the executive summary. But in the policy paper itself, yes, you have to put different kind of policy options and evaluate all these policy options to come up with one that you think, or 1, 2, or 3 that you think are the best course for the best that would give a best possible outcome for the problems that are being discussed. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Mbak Desi. Now, Mr. James, can you answer for Prof. Togi?
Yeah. Hi, Prof. Patogi. Thank you, sir, for those interventions and questions. I think, you know, in terms of managing the requests, right, competing requests, I think it's helpful in the beginning stage, especially if they come, you know, 1 or 2. To remain, of course, we want to be friendly. It's part of the service. We are service providers in the professional context. So obviously, first of all, is to listen to them and to demonstrate that we are considering their views. And once we consolidate the views, obviously, we are technical people. So we have to, you know, take a technical and professional approach in drafting. But however, in the parliamentary context, political power matters. So at that stage, that's where I think, you know, the needle changes, because depending on the power dynamics within Parliament, it does set the agenda to some extent to the final shape of the policy and later on with the law. As much as we debated, you know, there is still a final vote. So that's one thing. So in terms of white paper, so this is where I think we need to position the location of the white paper in the policy cycle. Most often, a white paper is a consultative public relations document. When the policy is quite advanced, that means we have, you know, navigated the informal requests, and then we had some preliminary discussions through the committees and also some of the power dynamics, right? So now we are in the stage where we are going to present the law, right? So the drafting committee has already had, you know, taken its own process and, you know, come up with the draft law. So the white paper is just to, it's like a valve. And often it's used for controversial bills and also new things that society is going to consider, such as climate change. It really depends on society and what is unique for each jurisdiction. So a white paper is an instrument where we allow both, you know, the Parliament to have a, you know, good discussion. We give it a period of time so the public can also interface, and then we come back. And then it comes back really to the political culture and the legal structure, you know, whether you are a multi-party parliament or a legislature and whether you have independent institutions, all of this, determine how much feedback is meaningfully and respectfully incorporated in the redrafting or rethinking, which is very different from, one party or one political force dominant states where they don't have, additional independent institutions where they may, from a PR point of view, do consultation, but never take the feedback. I hope, sir, that may, some way partially respond to your query.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. Pak Indra, mungkin mau menambahkan, Pak?
A little bit.
Oke, tadi saya melihat ada yang raise hand. Pak Indra mau menambahkan, Pak?
Ya, memang ada sedikit trouble juga sih. Halo? Halo?
Ya, halo.
Halo.
Itu siapa?
Dengar saya nggak?
Oke, saya tadi melihat ada raise hand, Pak Mardi Sontori ya.
Ada trouble.
Silakan Pak Mardi.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Dr. Lukman. I'm delighted to be here to participate in workshop sessions regarding a good policy paper for legislative agenda. I'm also say thank you very much for all the panelists who already present about the useful materials and also interesting presentations. First of all, I would like to introduce about myself. My name is Mardi Sontori. I'm working for legislative drafting in the Center for Legislative Drafting. Expertise agency in the Indonesian House of Representatives. Sorry for not a good Wi-Fi here. There are two questions. First, the question might be go to all of the panelists. And since we are working in political institutions and our users are politicians that coming from different political parties, and the question is how we can balance between the political interest and neutrality, because we are civil servant here, and how we can provide the policy papers as neutral as possible and also in line with the political interest. Do we need provide to make a political papers as requested by individual member of the parliament or political parties that's in line with their own political interest? The first one. The second question goes to Ibu Desi Simanjunta. Technically, you provide an example about executive summary. You using the bullet point instead of numbering. Do we need like a bullet point, or can we use otherwise like numbering and make it more clear in order, something like that? And thank you very much for your answer and response about these questions. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, terima kasih Bapak Mardi. Thank you, Mr. Mardi Santori. I think the first question was for Dr. James about how to balance the information and how to provide a policy paper which is balanced, because we are our users are MPs. So that is for Mr. James, and then.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Madi, for that question. And this is actually the most stressful part of being a professional in Parliament. to manage the organization structures. Often those kinds of very peculiar requests that have to do with research that may be very aligned to the MP or the party's position, they may be drafted by two levels. One, by the party itself. It really are not. So, but some are. So then that is where you want to kind of slightly encourage those requests. Secondly, parliaments also have paid staff. They are called legislative assistants that are attached to a particular MP. So these are tasks that these individuals. Now, then we are talking about other general staff, right? That are not assigned to a particular, MP or a function. So that's where really the challenge is, and there your role would be to kind of serve the parliament or the respective committee or subunit to which you are assigned. So yes, I recognize the difficulty, but these are some of the mechanisms we can use, and it varies from parliament to parliament.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. Mbak Desi, silakan Mbak.
Thank you very much, Pak Mardi. I think the question was whether we can also use numbering for the executive summary. I think the point is to make it very easy for the readers that don't have time, right, to read read your paper, or have a very short time. So I think numbering will be okay. It's just that I haven't found a policy paper that has a executive summary in numbers, but I think it would be okay, as long as when you're writing your executive summary, it is very clear and concise and sharp to the point, so that the people can get the content of the paper even when he doesn't read the paper. So that's the point.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mbak.
Pak Indra mau menambahkan, Mbak?
Dengar suara saya?
Iya, jelas, Pak.
Tadi ada koneksi buruk, saya tidak bisa mengikuti. Terima kasih, moderator. Makanya saya tadi nggak terlalu banyak nangkep yang pertanyaan-pertanyaan itu, tapi intinya bahwa yang paling penting dalam membuat policy brief atau policy paper di lembaga politik itu adalah penekanannya pada imparsialitas, netralitas, dan profesional. Arti profesional tadi itu adalah bahwa kalau dia policy brief atau policy paper itu hasil penelitian, tentu data itulah yang bermain, yang menunjukkan bahwa kita tidak berpihak kepada siapapun. Ada kasus di pusat penelitian misalnya, seorang penulis info singkat itu dihubungi sama salah satu anggota yang membaca info singkat tersebut. Dikarenakan menurut perspektif anggota yang bersangkutan, penulis tidak komprehensif atau berpihak. Lalu penulis yang bersangkutan dihubungi, lalu diskusilah yang terjadi. Nah, setelah diskusi tentu semuanya clear. Karena memang resiko-resiko seperti itu muncul ketika kita membuat policy brief di lembaga politik. Mungkin Bu Desi punya pengalaman seperti itu juga, gitu ya. Oleh karena itu, ketika kita membuat short brief atau policy brief, itu tools-nya juga harus tepat. Selain data dan fakta, walaupun tidak harus disampaikan secara detail teori yang ada di situ, tetapi tentu kita ada basic teori, basic konsep mengapa kita mengambil pilihan-pilihan kebijakan seperti itu. Dan saya pikir mostly dari teman-teman peneliti, karena memang redaksinya juga sangat ketat ya, di info singkat sama di parliamentary review, itu kita sangat menghindari bias itu tadi. Bahwa ada rekomendasi yang mungkin dinilai oleh salah satu anggota DPR sedikit tidak netral, bagi saya itu adalah satu resiko saja. Yang penting kita bisa menjelaskan, dan pada saat kita diminta untuk lebih menjelaskan detail itu karena memang tanggung jawab isi tulisan adalah pada penulis, bukan pada redaksi, tapi redaksilah yang memberikan koridor, mereview, dan memberikan agar supaya bisa lebih berkualitas di dalam policy brief itu. Begitu juga hasil penelitian, tidak harus disampaikan hasil penelitian semuanya, tapi rekomendasi atau kesimpulan yang dihasilkan itu adalah benar-benar berdasarkan data dan fakta di lapangan, tentu dengan visual analisis, teori atau konsep yang tepat, yang pas, yang dipilih. Apalagi itu hasil permintaan dari alat kelengkapan Komisi 1 sampai Komisi 11. Karena itu penekanan saya adalah pada basic data yang harus kita tunjukkan ketika kita berhadapan dengan para anggota DPR yang politisi, yang tentu punya banyak kepentingan, sudut pandang kepentingan yang berbeda-beda satu sama lain. Demikian Pak Moderator, terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Indra. I think Mr. Indra has raised a very good case. I think it is new for me even. I just heard this. So there was actually our product condition, and then the product was read by the member of parliament, and then the MPs assume that it is not very much impartial. So the MPs asked Mr. Indra regarding the brief information, and finally the case was solved after a short discussion. I think it's very good. For me, I think I'm very happy to know that MP read our product, yeah, even though you come to know about this because of a case, but that is a huge relief that they read our product. And then also next is we have also question from the chat rooms. I would like to read the question from Miss Edrida Pulungan. She's asking about how to identify the quality of policy brief which benefited for the parliament member and stakeholder. How to identify the quality. And according to Ms. Desi, how do you think about the policy analyst contribution in the parliament, government, and ASEAN? Thank you. That is from Mbak Edrida Pulungan. And then the second is from Mbak Opi. She is a legal drafter in our institution. So she's asking Mr. James. Her question is, it is interesting that Mr. James mentioned about the distinction between policy and legislation. As I am legal drafter, I used to focus on how to make draft policy into rule or law form. Yes, we are using policy paper, study, analysis, brief as one of our resources to draft the law. Could you please go further about it? That is from Mbak Opi. I think that is for these two questions will be enough for now. Okay, can you please give a reaction about this, Mr. James, Mbak Desi, dan Mr. Indra? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I especially want to focus on the question on legislation, the colleague from legislation. I want to go back and ask that colleague to ask the question about the international dimension. Because when you're doing the legal drafting, you know, it's imperative at least to consider what is international, what is Indonesia's international position, at least to be aware of. And one of the things that I found in my many years of interacting with parliamentarians, they have no clue because they tend to be so domestically focused. They have no clue what's coming outside, you know. So it's an issue of they're very busy, you know, they're very busy trying to keep their MPC or staying in power. So they have no time to read. So that's one of the problems. So I always recommend colleagues in the parliamentary houses to diversify the products time to time, to have also briefing notes on the, you know, the international obligations of particular countries such as Indonesia. So your MPs are kind of up to date, Yeah, whether it's a particular treaty body, special procedures, and so on. So that's important. Then for the actual drafting, right? Apart from aligning with the constitution, many constitutions, you know, they have been drafted over and over again. They often happen during some political crisis, so they will always claim the constitution respects international standards, right? So what are the international standards, and does your legislation actually comply? Now, politically, at the end of the day, you may decide you want to go your own way, but at least in the early stages, right, some reference needs to be made, and the political forces in parliament need to kind of come to terms how they are going to respond to their international obligations. So in short, I would say do pay attention to the international obligations, but politically, whether you follow it or you want to, you know, use different language, you know, the caveat is always, you know, culture and national interest. So if you do need to use that for your domestic situation, then, you know, at least you are fully aware, and and it's a great opportunity to educate your lawmakers. Thank you.
Next, Mbak Desi, silakan.
I think there's a question about what I think of the policy analyst contribution in the parliament, government, and ASEAN. So I think all of you are doing something very important for the parliament, and obviously the policy analysts for the government and ASEAN also. I think policy briefs, policy analysis, policy studies are one of the how do you call that, a source for our legislators and our government and also other stakeholders for them to make a decision. So it is a decision-making tool. So it is very important that we produce very good policy brief with quality and that are based on good research, and not only just to fulfill some sort of a obligation, but also to put our commitment in it, and to make it to have an understanding of what it is supposed to be, and also to bear in mind that the policy that will be produced by people who are reading our policy briefs are very important for the rest of the society.
Thank you, Mbak Desi. We still have some questions in the chat room. One is from Mbak Opi. Still, Mbak Opi, I missed this question. She was asking to Mr. James, how to make it easy to read. Is it in reality, result of our work is in form of legislative drafting, but we have to also explain and present it in form of the member of parliament as a policy brief. How to make it easy to read and understand, also luring to the audiences, since the law legislation has more strict to the point and stiff delivery. So she was asking how to make it easy to understand. And then from Mr. Hasbi, he's an expert staff in Commission 5. He's asking, may we offer or provide subjective choices or personal best opinions on the recommendation in the policy brief, because usually we propose 3 options to the user. If so, what is the strategy? Is it placed on the first page or at the end of the policy brief, at the last page? That is from Mr. Hasbi. I think it can be for both to all the panelists. And the third question is from Mas Sandi Naywan. He is asking to Pak Indra. Saat katanya Mas Sandi, saat presentasi Bapak menekankan agar menghindari kalimat yang bersayap dan beranak pinak. Dapatkah diberikan salah satu contoh kalimat yang dimaksud, Pak? Mengingat setiap kalimat dapat diinterpretasikan berbeda-beda juga oleh setiap individu atau kelompok, dalam hal ini fraksi misalnya. Terima kasih. Okay, I think the first chance is for Mr. James to respond question from Mbak Opi. Thank you. Please, Mr. James.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, in the interest of time, I'll be brief. Essentially, you have, drafting is a craft. writing is a craft. So, as individuals in this area, we all have developed certain skills. So either you as an individual or your manager who looks after you and knows the range of skills, they will have to decide which pool of colleagues, you're already in departments, do the legal portion, because that's really technical language. And lawyers tend to be nitpicky, they're very detailed and, sometimes annoying, So, but then you have other people who then give life to the legal language. So I think you are really looking at two different skill sets and two sets of individual. And really, it's a partnership. So you have the policy drafter, then you have the legal drafter, and I think they need to speak, they need to converse, and that's the mechanism. And I think you need to have that interface. Yeah.
Menarik. It's very interesting, Mr. James. So actually, for those two parts, we have here in DPR, legal drafter and also researcher. Normally, the two of us, we cooperate together because legal drafter are more low languages, and we are the researcher. We have to, sometimes we have you say drafting is a craft, and that is the craft that we contribute sometimes. That's very interesting. Okay, Mbak Desi, silakan, Mbak.
I think the question was from Pak Hasbi. I think I've written my answer. So briefly, I said, in my opinion, it is good to write briefly the three options that you're going to write already on the first page, just briefly. But then at in the paper itself or in the last page, you can elaborate on these three options. What's that? The aim is to put your findings or your opinion already in the beginning, but very briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Desi. Selanjutnya Pak Indra, pertanyaan dari Pak Nayawan.
Iya, ya Pak Sandi, Nayawan, memang ada penulis yang dengan stylenya itu terkadang membuat kalimat yang panjang, padahal fokusnya cuma satu. Jadi kalau kita mau menuju ke Depok, ya lewat jalan tol langsung ke Cijago gitu ya, tidak muter-muter di Pasar Minggu, lalu di Pasar Minggu mampir dulu ke tempat-tempat yang lain. Kira-kira seperti itu gambarannya. Jadi misalnya hari ini ada pemilihan presiden Amerika, tapi yang menulis itu menceritakan dulu bahwa Amerika itu terletak di benua Amerika, merupakan jumlah penduduknya sekian, gitu. Padahal fokusnya adalah tentang pemilihan presiden Amerika. Itu sih kira-kira gambarnya seperti itu. Kenapa? Karena informasi yang tadi disampaikan itu sebetulnya kan selain tidak fokus yang menjadi mau disampaikan, juga mungkin sebagian besar orang sudah tahu juga tentang informasi itu gitu. Saya pikir Pak Sandi jauh lebih paham lah. Yang paling penting memang untuk menghindari bias itu adalah interpretasi, ya. Meminimalkan interpretasi. Sulit untuk menghindari bahwa setiap orang punya interpretasi masing-masing, apalagi politisi. Yang saya sampaikan, pengalaman saya pribadi pada saat pendampingan di Badan Legislasi waktu itu ya, ketika mensupport salah satu RUU gitu ya, waktu itu saya lupa RUU-nya apa gitu. Kalau tidak salah advokat, walaupun sebetulnya bukan bidang saya gitu, tapi ada beberapa teman tim hukum juga di situ ya. Waktu itu kita ingin membatasi, karena itu juga sebetulnya bagian dari pemikiran Bapak Ibu anggota juga, agar supaya advokat ini juga dibatasi ketika sudah menjadi anggota DPR. Jadi kaitannya dengan posisi dia sebagai anggota DPR. Nah, pada saat kami presentasi, ya, kami mencoba senetral mungkin menyampaikannya. Tetapi dari perspektif beberapa anggota yang kebetulan latar belakangnya adalah advokat, menilai bahwa apa yang kami sampaikan itu berpihak kepada orang atau pihak yang bukan advokat. Karena menurut mereka yang advokat itu sebetulnya punya hak untuk tetap melakukan kegiatannya pada saat menjadi anggota DPR. Sebetulnya sama profesi yang lain itu seperti itu. Apakah seorang dokter itu tetap boleh praktek ya? Memang berbeda-beda interpretasi itu. Oleh karena itu memang background dan argumentasinya yang harus kuat. Karena seorang anggota DPR harusnya lepas semua atribut sosial yang lain karena dia adalah wakil rakyat. Dia adalah representatif ya. Bahwa ada aspirasi dari kelompok-kelompok masyarakat yang merupakan profesi dia sebelumnya, itu tentu menjadi tugas anggota DPR itu untuk bisa menyampaikannya kepada forum-forum yang tepat di lembaga perwakilan ini. Itu pernah saya alami ya, oleh karena itu memang sampai waktu itu dituduh berpihak dan akhirnya ya marah-marah juga gitu ya. Tapi anyway nggak apa-apa, sepanjang kita profesional dan imparsial tadi, saya pikir kami sampaikan, toh keputusan politik ada di tangan Bapak Ibu anggota sendiri seperti itu. Kecuali misalnya tenaga ahli yang memang melekat di salah satu anggota atau fraksi tentu harus sejalan dengan visi misi atau kebijakan partainya masing-masing. Saya pikir itu juga perlu diperhatikan, tetapi tetap informasi, data, dan faktanya harus benar. Hanya tinggal bagaimana perspektif masing-masing anggota atau audiens kita itu melihat informasi itu sepanjang kita punya argumentasi, data, fakta, dan landasan konsep yang kuat. Begitu Pak Moderator, terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Indra. Di kolom chat masih ada pertanyaan-pertanyaan. In the chat room we still have some questions. I think our discussion attract a lot of questions from our participants. I will read the first question is from Mr. Prayudi. He's one of our senior researcher. He's asking, what is your comment about regulatory impact assessment or RIA as a system approach to critical assessing the positive and negative effects of proposed and existing regulations and non-regulatory alternatives? The existence of every draft bills always have academic draft as a base of theoretical data and research methodology which can identification by the regulatory impact assessment. I think it's for all panelists. And then there's a question from Aryo Jani Purnomo. I think it's a very good question. He's asking, how is the strategy to make a policy brief in the middle of a fast-changing issues? Because the issues keep changing, so how can we make a policy brief in the middle of it? And the third is from Mr. Budi Prasetya. He's asking how to convince members of the Parliament that their request to make law does not need to be made because the materials have been regulated in various laws that have been passed and are in effect. And then how to make material collection for a study of something as a reason for members of the Parliament to make a decision even though there is no sufficient data or writing or journal about it. That's the three questions. I think the first chance I will give to Mbak Desi. Please, Mbak Desi.
I don't really have one specific answer for the regulatory impact assessment because I don't have an experience on that. I think I will give Dr. Gomez the time to to answer this question, but I will answer the question of Mr. Chisa, right? So izin bagaimana membuat strategi tentang policy brief di tengah-tengah Aryo ya, isu cepat berubah. So Mas Aryo, actually this is a very interesting question because this is what I feel also every day, that I'm actually chasing the issue, right? So but that's our profession, so we have to do that. So I think one of the best strategy is to continue reading the news about it and continue being updated about what is happening. And then even when you are not yet being asked to do your policy brief, you already have your kind of data, or in your head, or like your documents, so that when you get the request, you can make it in a quick way. But that's the only thing I can say to Mr. Aryo. I think for the question on how to convince members of the people's representative that their request to make laws does not need to be made. That is a very interesting question. I don't know how you guys convince members of representatives to people's representatives to not make laws. I think that's also very problematic in Indonesia. There are so many laws being made that are not maybe useful. I don't know. Yeah. So, okay, there's another question: how to make material collection for a study of something as a reason for members of the parliament to make a decision, even though there is no sufficient data or writing or journal about it. I think there always have to be sufficient data, because you cannot write out of nothing, right? So if I understand the question correctly, you have to be able to do your research quickly and to do it comprehensively enough so that you can form your policy recommendations. I think that's very important. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maresi. Mr. James, that first question I think is for you.
Yeah. Well, in an ideal world, if the budget and the time allows for the impact assessment, that's great, because that's so much needed, right? But the question is whether they will allow you the time and the budget to do that, because, they're always in a hurry, and it's always last minute. So we often do not have the luxury of doing an impact assessment, So I think that we need to recognize. But of course, the other question is the maturity of the institutions and the maturity and experience of the people within the institution. And the institution here that I'm talking about is Parliament and Legislature. I remember witnessing a session in your Parliament just when there was the big, fundamental transition almost 2 decades ago in Indonesia. And the types of people who made to Parliament weren't very well informed, so I think taking a reality check about the maturity and the development of the legislature of Parliament in a respective jurisdiction is also important, because part of the challenges MPs face is lack of experience. So there's a whole education process that needs to be undertaken by this house. I'm talking about the technical people, and it's not easy, because, MPs always, their egos are bigger than everybody else combined. So suddenly, they are elected and, you can't tell them anything, but I've seen it's a particular species. It's nothing to do with Indonesia. You go to Cambodia, it's the same problem. You go to Thailand, it's the same problem. So it's just power changes, perception of self-power changes everything, and that's part of the challenge of the bureaucracy and the professional staff. So I think to recognize educating parliamentarians is also a very important function, and I think underlines some of the challenges you face. Yeah, stop there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. Saya rasa pertanyaan dari Mas Budi tadi itu mungkin yang paling tepat yang menjawab Pak Indra ya. Bagaimana bisa meyakinkan anggota bahwasanya undang-undang itu nggak perlu karena sudah diatur di bagian yang lain, atau bagaimana kita bisa membuat sebuah analisa ketika kita rasa datanya tidak cukup. Mungkin Pak Indra bisa menambahkan, Pak.
Ya, ini sebetulnya banyak yang bisa menjawab karena memang pengalaman dari para senior juga pernah mengalami seperti itu ya. Tapi setidaknya saya cerita dari pengalaman saya sendiri ya, bahwa pada satu ketika kami dipanggil sama pimpinan Komisi 2 saat itu untuk merangkai bahwa pemikiran-pemikiran pimpinan Komisi 2 dan beberapa anggota Komisi 2 untuk merangkai menjadi suatu naskah akademik dan RUU pemilu yang baru. Ini karena di bidang saya itu. Terus berdasarkan hasil rancangan cepat kami ya, dengan teman-teman legal drafter pada saat itu, ternyata materi yang disusun untuk perubahan itu banyak dari sisi aturan Undang-Undang P3 itu, ini bukan perubahan tapi ini penggantian. Terus kami sampaikan bahwa sebenarnya perubahan sistem pemilu itu tidak terlalu mendesak dan harus diganti di setiap pemilu. Dan dalam diskusi intern di antara kami dengan pimpinan, kita juga menyampaikan beberapa praktek, dan saya pikir beliau-beliau juga sudah memberikan informasi itu dari beberapa sumber ya. Tetapi tentu yang tidak bisa dilepaskan adalah perspektif atau kepentingan dari setiap partai politik yang ada. Nah, pada akhirnya keputusan untuk melanjutkan atau tidak melanjutkan itu adalah beliau juga, bahwa RU ini menjadi penting atau tidak penting. Kami sudah memberikan masukan bahwa tidak ada satu negara pun yang bisa menerapkan satu sistem pemilu terbaik, tetapi yang ada adalah sistem pemilu yang cocok. Kita memang masih mencari bentuk sistem pemilu itu, tetapi bukan berarti yang sudah dilaksanakan adalah yang buruk. Bahwa ada kekurangan, iya. Tapi sekali lagi, ya, karena tidak ada yang terbaik, tentu proses untuk mencari yang terbaik itulah yang dilakukan. Dan tahun ini terjadi lagi, tetapi mungkin kondisinya sebaliknya. Ya. Kondisi sebaliknya, ketika ada peta politik atau konstelasi politik berubah, RUU pemilu yang sudah disiapkan oleh BKD, yang itu juga atas perintah tentu ya dari komisi yang terkait, akhirnya sebagian besar fraksi tidak menginginkan, lalu akhirnya tidak masuk ke dalam prioritas prolegnas atau bahkan prioritasnya pun belum diputuskan. Jadi gampang-gampang susah meyakinkan politisi ya, karena kalau saya kebetulan di RUU bidang politik pengalaman beberapa waktu yang lalu itu, ketika berinteraksi langsung secara intens, tentu dari hati ke hati ya, tergambar bagaimana proses politik yang terjadi yang tidak mudah juga di setiap anggota DPR itu bisa memutuskan. Kalau istilah dulu ada namanya para dewa, karena akhirnya para dewa lah yang memutuskan seperti itu. Tetapi untuk RUU yang mungkin yang di luar bidang politik ya sebetulnya ada beberapa faktor yang bisa berpengaruh ya, politisi atau anggota DPR itu memutuskan tidak atau melanjutkan RUU PKS misalnya, RUU apalagi peradilan militer misalnya, RUU kekerasan pekerja rumah tangga ya seperti itu, sampai hari ini belum. Ada juga respon dari masyarakat yang akhirnya ada yang dilanjutkan, ada yang tidak dilanjutkan. Saya pikir itu gampang-gampang susah untuk meyakinkan, tetapi tentu kita harus berdiri pada profesionalitas kita dan imparsialitas kita, bahwa ini keilmuan kita sampaikan bahwa keputusan politik ada di tangan Bapak Ibu. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Indra. Thank you, Mr. Indra. I think Mr. Indra have gave a very good example what has been done before this. Actually, Mr. Indra answered the question from Mr. Budi, who asked, how can we convince MPs that the bills that they are suggesting is not need to be made? And then Mr. Indra said that through discussions we can solve this problem. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Indra. And then I think the questions in the chat room is finished, but I can still give one more question from the audience. If you want to ask, you can raise your hand. Okay, I can see that Prof. Togi raised his hand. Please, Mr. Togi, for your questions.
Well, thank you very much. I think as long as Pak Budi can propose a good policy paper to MPs, whether we need or not a new law or a new regulations, it can convince the MPs, the respected MPs. So you don't need to make a strong argument or in strong debate. The problem to us, I think, have you make policy paper based on evidence, or make it based on research? If you have made it properly, I think we can avoid interpretations. We can avoid opinions, yeah, and the MPs can be explained clearly about their real need. My question, I think this is my last question to Dr. Gomez, that has links with this comment. How far we can negotiate alignment with MPs, because it's quite difficult to prevent our subjective evaluations, yeah, or views. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Togi. Mr. James, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for the question. Let me pick an example from Singapore. Let me speak a little bit on the issue of minimum wage. Let me talk about the Singapore Parliament, which is dominated by the People's Action Party, and it's got a certain philosophy of, you know, economics and politics that it kind of keeps to. Then let me speak about two opposition party, the Workers' Party, which has 10 MPs in Parliament, still less than 10% of Parliament. And then you have the other party called the Singapore Democratic Party, which is outside of Parliament. It doesn't have parliamentary seat. As far as the minimum wage policy is concerned, and both the Workers' Party and the Singapore Democratic Party, they have, policy positions where they believe a minimum wage should be accorded. So it's based on, their position is always based on research, looking at global standards, looking at the volume of countries around the world that have initiated minimum wage, and kind of benchmarking in relation to the GDP. The slight difference between the Workers' Party and SDP is really around a few dollars in terms of, what is the peg for a minimum wage. Now you switch to the People's Action Party. They also come up with research. They are ideologically opposed to the minimum wage, right? Because of the party's philosophy to economics, and not wanting to be so-called, in their words, a welfare state. So it comes up with alternative, arguments, and it comes up with different kind of mechanism to say, okay, if you say, security guards and, cleaners don't, earn well enough in high-cost Singapore, then let's find a way to boost their income by some other government supplements or training schemes and things like that. So at the end of the day, no matter how your research is and how impartial it is, power does play, and this is one of the variables we need to consider in a realistic manner. And a lot of the senior colleagues who work professionally and have seen MPs come and go are one of the most valuable teachers or mentors we can have within the House, because it's all about human nature and how you manage. But unfortunately, power is a key variable, and then ultimately it decides.
Thank you, Mr. James. So power is the very important variable, right?
What about Dr.
Okay,
Simanjuntak?
for the next session, I would like to give Mr.
with
Chief,
Dr. Simanjuntak, could you
Dr.
answer?
Innocentius Samso to give some comments.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for all of you that participate in this. I think this is like knowledge sharing time for us, take and give, and it is a good method to upgrade our capacity, to do our best in product policy paper. Thank you to Mr. Gomez, James, for your participation in this session, and thank you to Ibu Desi Simanjutak. I hope that one day you can come to Jakarta, and please, both of you, come to our office in the Senayan, in the House of Representatives. Thank you to once again to all of the participants today. That I hope that this is or useful for you, and I hope that we can improve ourselves with the next series of our workshops. The next series we will focus on the research methods. Research methods that there are two speakers or research person, Professor Mulyadi, and I saw him in this Zoom meeting, and one of our colleagues, Dr. Roni Bako, and I have to give especially my thanks to Professor Partogi. I know that you are you are the senior one researchers here, and you have your life is along with the development of the expertise agency, and I think Professor Partogi is one of the colleagues that was recruited in 1990, and I hope that with me, and I hope that as a senior researcher, you can give more your experience by using this forum. I see here Pak Prayudi too. Yes, thank you very much for your joining. Simila Vector, thank you. Our junior, our junior is waiting for our support or our sharing knowledge to them. So I hope that in the future, all of researchers, legal drafters here, law or legal analysis, budget analysis, they have a good capacity in supporting the House. Once more, thank you very much for this session. It's and I will give back the time to Dr. Lukman. Thank you, Dr. Lukman.
Thank you, our chief, Mr. Sensi. And ladies and gentlemen, finally we have come to end of our discussion. And I think it is a very fruitful discussion. We have learned about the tricks and tips how to make a policy, and how can we make our policy read, and how can we make the message is delivered to the MPs in sufficient manner. And I think it's very good conversation, sharing knowledge from our panelists, and also from the members of the Zoom meeting today. And that brings me to the end of the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention, for your discussion. I hope to see you again for the next workshop within the next 2 weeks. Okay, bye-bye for now. And before that, please give your best smile, because we'd like to take our picture. Okay?
Especially for Mr. Juli Panglima, one of my old friends.
I will count to 3,
Yes,
and then please open your camera, and we'll take a picture.
Yes, I
1,
heard from the first
2,
until
3.
the end.
Okay. Okay, I will repeat. 1, 2, 3. Sudah? Okay. Thank you once again. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Simanjuntak and Dr. Gomez. Thank you.
Dr. James and Ibu Desi. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye
Terima
for
kasih Bu
now.
Desi, terima kasih Dr. Gomez. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Terima kasih banyak semua. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Bu Desi.
Terima kasih. Thank you so
Terima
much.
kasih.
Tadi bagus.
For the
Terima
speakers.
kasih Pak Hasbi, terima kasih pertanyaannya. Dr. James, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bye, James.
Thank you, Miss
Desi.
James. Miss Desi.
Iya.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Tugas dan fungsi DPR RI sangat penting bagi negeri ini sebagai pengemban amanat rakyat. Namun tidak banyak yang tahu apa saja fungsi dan tugas dari DPR. DPR mempunyai 3 fungsi pokok, yaitu legislasi, anggaran, dan pengawasan. Ketiga fungsi tersebut harus dilaksanakan dalam kerangka fungsi representasi yang mengedepankan kepentingan rakyat berdasarkan aspirasi masyarakat dan untuk kesejahteraan rakyat. Dari fungsi legislasi, DPR RI mempunyai tugas dan wewenang untuk menyusun dan menetapkan program legislasi nasional